I really think any time is a great time to start your own business. When times are not so great, you don't have a very robust pipeline, so it's easier to leave an environment when you don't have a lot of strings attached. If you focus on just one thing and get to be known as the person who knows that better than anything else, you'll be very, very successful. This is such a great business. It's never not a good time to become a broker.
Bob, thank you for coming back on the show again. I don't think our viewers need a big introduction to you, but I think let's go ahead and do it, and tell us a little bit about your history in commercial real. I know you got started in 1984 and you launched Massey Knakal in 1988. Why don't you take us from there?
That's right. Been a broker in New York City, Joe, selling buildings since '84. As you mentioned, Paul Massey and I started Massey Knakal Realty Services in 1988. Grew it from just the two of us to over 250 people in 2014 when we sold the business to Cushman and Wakefield. One of the things, two things I'm very proud of about the whole Massey Knakal experience. One, we were just a little local popcorn stand of a company in New York. But from 2001 to 2014, when CoStar tracked the market, the number two company in New York had sold about 1,300 buildings over that time period. Massey Knakal sold over 4,000. So we lapped the field by more than 3 times. And that included all the big national and global firms. But the thing that I'm most proud of is that today, we when back in the MK days, we ran the business with a servant leadership management style, really pumping up the people that worked with us, building their self-esteem, training them extensively, and encouraging them to do better than their best, and grew some really great professionals. And today in the New York City investment sales market, there are 30 companies or divisions of companies that are owned by or run by people we taught the business to. So that's a legacy that I'm very, very proud of. And, sold the business to Cushman in 2014, was there for 3.5 years, left and went to JLL, and brought 53 people with me from Cushman, all of whom had been with me at Massey Knakal. At both Cushman and JLL, I served as chairman of New York Investment Sales. And a few months ago, started a new company again, BKREA, doing investment sales and things like that. And so while it's a new company, I'm just doing the same old thing I've been doing for 40 years.
Right.
I've been last week, I sold property number 2,339. That's about $22 billion of total aggregate sales value, and feel very fortunate that I still love the business as much today as I did the day I started. And it's a career for me and a hobby, and absolutely love the business.
It's you went over the 22 billion pretty quickly. That's a huge number. So congratulations on that, and you're still going strong. The reason I want to get you on, Bob, is I'm in the middle of writing an article. People have been asking, is now a good time to launch my own commercial brokerage company? And I started writing an article on it. I go, you know what? Bob is going through it right now. Let's get him on and get his 2 cents on it. Because I think coming from somebody that's so well established and you're starting back over, you started your own company in 1988 to what you're doing now in 2024. Obviously, there's a lot of differences, but I guess point blank, do you think now is a great time to be launching your own commercial real estate brokerage company? I mean, obviously you're doing it, but not everybody's Bob Knakal.
Yeah, well, Joe, I will tell you just some macro observations about things. I've worked at the biggest global firms. I've worked for myself, and I will say there are pros and cons to everything.
Right.
Pros and cons to small businesses, mid-sized businesses, very large businesses. Pros and cons of working for yourself, working for somebody else. And I think the secret is always, try to take advantage of the positive things in that environment that you're in, and try to stay out of the way for the negative stuff as best you can. And sometimes it's hard to take advantage of both spectrums. But is it a good time to start? Well, you know what? I always find that in challenging times, it's that there is typically a lot of movement as people try to move to a new firm, thinking the grass is always greener,
Yeah.
or maybe a company's going to pay them to come over, and commissions haven't been so great, so maybe I get a lump sum payment from somebody. So typically there's a lot of movement. There's also a lot of folks getting out of the business. I think the average commercial broker, um, that works in commercial real estate makes less than 100 grand a year. In tougher times, those folks may be making very little and they choose to get out of the business. So that tends to create opportunity. But I really think any time is a great time to start your own business. When times are not so great, you don't have a very robust pipeline, so it's easier to leave an environment when you don't have a lot of strings attached. You have less competition, but it's challenging.
Yeah.
If you leave in good times, you probably have a good amount of money in the bank and you have a robust pipeline, but that is tougher to leave. But you're going to start making money right away. So, yeah, there again, pros and cons to everything. But I'm a big advocate of people starting their own business.
Yeah. The first thing I ask them, Bob, is why now? Why do you want to do it now? And it's an environment that is, if you're, I guess you're focusing this company, BK Real Estate Advisors is focused simply on asset sales, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you ever plan on taking it full service, or you're just going to always be asset sales?
No, I want to keep it small. Don't want to get bogged down with big overhead.
Okay.
We're paying better than market splits to folks, but asking them to pick up their overhead,
Mhm.
and don't want to get the overhead too big. At MK, as I said, we had 250 people, more than 250 people, and that that requires layers and layers of management. I don't want to get
Yeah.
into the management business. I like selling buildings,
Yeah.
so don't want to get into other fields. We're forming strategic alliances with people and have a big network of folks that we can rely on to refer other types of business to.
Mhm.
But gonna stick to our knitting, as we say, and just do the thing that we know best.
Do you think, if I'm thinking about launching a commercial brokerage company right now, I mean, obviously you've got such a huge base in this. So if somebody else was thinking about doing it, would you recommend that they pick an asset class and that's what they open on, and then eventually over time expand into other asset classes?
Yeah, well, I think specialization really is critically important.
Yeah.
When we started Massey Knackle, we had a geographic approach to the business and got to be an expert in a neighborhood. And that was a way to differentiate yourself. Publicly available information back in those days was not great. What was available was very inaccurate. So understanding everything that was going on in a neighborhood created a way for us to differentiate ourselves and create a competitive advantage. Today, I think that product specialization is the way to do it. There's a ton of publicly available information around. It's very accurate. And so you want to leverage your time as best as you possibly can. And I will tell you, I think from a brokerage perspective, brokers have two main assets, their knowledge and their time. We're always trying to increase our knowledge base and become smarter. You can't really make more time, so you have to use time more efficiently. So, if you sold a variety of buildings last week, you sold a retail property, an apartment building, and an office building, and this week you're pitching an office building, that owner doesn't want to hear about the retail property or the apartment building you sold, and wants to hear everything about the office building you sold. Well,
Mhm.
if you had sold three office buildings last week, then 100% of the time that you spent working was accretive towards getting this week's assignment. And that's kind of the way that you can create time a little bit by using it more effectively.
Yeah.
So I think product specialization is important. I think also you really want to be an expert. That's if I look back on the folks who have been most successful in the real estate business as brokers, they have three main characteristics that consistently run through those top producers. One, they're an expert at something. Two, they have tremendous passion for the business. And three, they utilize discipline very well. But that expertise part, if you focus on just one thing and get to be known as the person who knows that better than anything else, you'll be very, very successful. And better to be an expert at one thing rather than a jack of all trades, because then you're not an expert at anything.
Yeah.
I think that to the extent you can, and clearly that's a lot easier in a very large, dense market. In smaller markets or tertiary markets, it's impossible to just focus on one thing. You have to do a variety of things. But
Sure.
to the extent the market's big enough that you could be an expert just in one thing, I highly recommend that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm talking to a couple of young guys that are thinking about launching their own firm. And they just think, well, I look at some companies here over the last 5 years that have launched, they've got offices all around the country. And I said, well, it's a completely different time in the marketplace now than it was then. It's a lot harder to get deals, but you've got to really, I think I'm just like you are at this point. Because when we launched, we were full service. And if I had to do it all over again, I'd be doing it just like you're doing. It saves a lot of headaches.
Hmm.
Um, do you guys plan on opening multiple offices, or are you going to stick with one
Nope.
office? That's
Nope.
good.
One office.
Smart. Keep that overhead low. You How has recruiting changed? So when you were doing it in '88 to where you're at in 2024?
Well, like in '88, we really didn't have much of a value
Yeah,
proposition.
it was hard, right?
It was, hey, this company hasn't sold a building yet. You want to come work with us?
Yeah.
Uh, so that's that was a tough thing, and kind of friends and acquaintances and people that we knew from other aspects of our life were the first people that came to work with us because they
Mhm.
knew us and trusted us. But it was definitely a challenge at the beginning. Don't forget, in the Massey Knackle days, we started November of '88.
Mhm.
By September of 2001, we had 15 people. So 13 years later, we had grown from 2 to 21. And so it was slow going back in those days. I mean, I've been up and running for a few months now. I already have 11 people, but I think maxing out around 15 to 20 is probably where I want to get to. And I think with technology today, 15 or 20 could probably do what it used to take 100 to do.
Yeah.
But recruiting's been a little bit easier, given that fortunately a lot of folks know who I am and what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think now you can pick up the phone and have a conversation. Now, how did you make those first calls when you were launching in 1988? How did you start making those calls? But I think a lot of people that are watching this, you may think, well, I'm not Bob Knakal now. I'm back Bob Knakal in '88. How do they get started? How do they pick up that phone? What do they say to a potential recruiting
Well,
agent?
I'll take you back even further to '84 when I started in the business, started making calls and had absolutely zero track record.
Right.
Well, number one, making prospecting calls, cold calls, whatever you want to refer to them as, that is the most important revenue generating activity that
Mhm.
you can do in our business. Meeting people face to face is critically important and develops great relationships, but everybody has to bang the phones.
Yeah.
And so when making calls, the most important thing is to always have something of value to offer to the person you're speaking to. If you just call them up and said, hey, do you want to sell your building? They're probably going to hang up on you. So you have to offer something of value. We always did a lot of research on the market, had market reports, market stats and data and things that we could share with people. And generally, if somebody owns a building, they're interested to hear what's happening in the market because what's happening in the market will
Mhm.
affect the value of their investment. So, um, we had good success with newsletters and market reports and
Yeah.
writing articles about what was happening, and always wanted to offer that to people so they could understand the market a little better.
Sure. But then when you got into '88, you had to start recruiting. How did you begin that? You just went back to cold calling, smiling and dialing, only it was to agents this time instead of clients?
Yeah, well, we went to people that we knew. We had been in the market for, about 4.5 years, at the point that we started the firm, and called the people that we had known,
Yeah.
called friends, called people that we knew in the business, said, "Hey, we want to grow. Do you know anybody wants to be an investment sales broker in New York?" And the first salesman we hired, Ed Winslow, was a broker with CB out in New Jersey. And Ed was and I were working together. I was basically the folks in New Jersey said, "Hey, these young guys in New York really have stumbled onto something really effective. Go speak to them, find out how they're doing, what they're doing." And so I developed a relationship with Ed. So I think the day after we opened the doors, he called and said, "Hey, I heard you started your own company. I want to come work with you guys." Then our second salesman was Jim Ventura, a guy I went to kindergarten with and have been friends with my whole life. And he was working on the horse track. And I said, "Hey, you want to come sell real estate?" And that's pretty much the way it started out.
So sphere of influence is how you got started, really.
Hmm.
What were obviously you guys blew this company up nicely, Massey Knakal. What were you guys doing different? How are you setting yourself apart?
Well, again, I think specialization is important. So we had our territory system where Paul and I each had relatively small geographic territory, made a catalog book with photos of every property, ownership information, and lines on a page where we filled in the conversation we had with everybody. No computers back in those days. Um, and literally, we studied comparable sales for 3 years, knew who the buyers were, who was selling, what zoning changes were affecting value, what new developments were going on in the area. And we studied those comparables very, very closely, knew every building that sold, knew just about everything that was on the market. And when we called people, we said, "Hey, our value proposition was very, very narrow. So we only sell buildings, we only represent sellers, we only work on exclusives, and we only work in your neighborhood." That took about 6 seconds to say.
Yep.
Nothing is unclear or opaque about it. We told people right off the bat, "Look, all we're going to try to do is get hired to sell buildings by the seller, get hired exclusively, and then try to get the highest prices we possibly can." And that was a value proposition that caught on. I remember, we were pitching a building. We had only, this is back in 85 or 86. They'd only sold a few buildings, and an owner said to us, "Well, I do want to sell and I like you guys, but I'm talking to the other companies, the other brokers have been around for 10 years, 15 years. You guys, don't have much of a track record." And we said, "Yeah, we don't have much of a track record, but we know more about this neighborhood than any other broker does," and went through all the numbers, how many buildings, what's the turnover rate, what's the average price per foot, the average cap rate for all the different property types, and could recite that very easily. And then we said, "Yeah, we've only sold 3 buildings, but one building was down the block, one was across the street, and one was right next to you. And we know more about this neighborhood than anybody, and we can be a better advocate for you in
Yep.
terms of convincing buyers why they should pay more for your building." And that caught on and started to snowball and worked very effectively for us.
Yeah. The one thing you mentioned when you were talking earlier is about your training. What training did you guys do that really helped set your agents apart? I mean,
Oh,
to go ahead.
yeah, we had a lot of training, a lot of training. We had initial success training. In fact, when a broker would come on board, they had to pass initial success training before they were able to pick up the phone and call anybody. And that initial success training usually took about 2 to 3 months. What did that consist of? Everyone was assigned a territory, said, "Go out, walk every street, take a picture of every building, I want a 3-year history of comparable sales for the neighborhood so that you could talk intelligently about it. You have to learn underwriting, learn how to do a valuation, study the marketing pitch and how you're going to deliver that. And then we gave them a building within the territory to analyze and said, all right, you have to pitch a panel of 3 people, including Paul and I were always part of the panel, and 2 other people, senior people at the company. You had to deliver a pitch, and we're going to ask you tough questions, and you have to pass. And if you passed, you could get on the phone. If you didn't pass, you had to go back. You had a week to study up, work with our director of training, figure out how to do better, and come back and pass it. And then that was initial success training, we called it. And then we had continual training for everybody. We had a training meeting for the whole company once a week. We'd have different topics each week. Either Paul or myself or one of our senior people would lead the session. We often had outside people come in and give lectures about different topics. And so we constantly were trying to improve the skill sets that our folks had and help them to grow.
Is that training going on? I mean, it probably wasn't going on in other companies, was it?
I don't know if it was in that fashion, not that I'm aware of.
I bet not.
Again, our training manual had about well over 200 pages, all kinds of things on all kinds of topics, and we always liked having guest speakers come in. It was expensive to have them come in, but really made a difference. We had, Bob Cialdini, who's the head of the psych department at University of Arizona. He's probably the leading authority on the topic of persuasion in the United States. He came in and did a 2-hour presentation on how to persuade people. We had Tom Donaldson, one of my Wharton professors, come and do a session on business ethics. We always had people coming in to do training for our folks because it's important. Nobody knows everything.
Mhm.
But you want to try to teach people as much as you possibly can to help them do the best job they possibly can do.
Yeah. Did you guys have a mentoring program?
Not a formal mentoring program. We basically our setup for our office was a bullpen type setup, and
Okay.
all of our senior people were out, including Paul and I, were out in the middle of the bullpen. So everybody heard everything we were saying all day. We could hear what other people were saying, and if fortunately, I think when folks would hear us on the phone, it gave them an education of sorts. And then when we heard people on the phone, if they weren't doing everything the way they should be, we go over, hey, when this situation comes up, you might want to say this or say that rather than what you said, and here's why. So the whole ecosystem was kind of a learning experience, but we had those training meetings once a week that were very important.
Very powerful. That's one thing I think we got away from in our industry is enough training. And that's something we're trying to really focus on. But now when you guys opened, Massey Knakal ended up with how many offices?
We had 3 offices and then a small satellite in New Jersey, but um, we're in Manhattan, Brooklyn, the Bronx. We had a Brooklyn in a Queens office. We worked in the Bronx, but the Bronx folks worked out of our Manhattan office.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. And didn't you set that up very much like a residential firm, or how did you set that up?
Well, we implemented a territory system, which I guess
Okay.
the closest thing to that would be a residential farming approach, where a house broker goes to a neighborhood and rings every doorbell.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we did, but the buildings were commercial buildings. We'd go around the block and call on every owner on the block, and then go to the next block and call on every owner on that block. And so it was very, very similar to a farming mechanism.
Okay. Are you implementing that for your agents now again?
No, it's more product specialization. The people may have heard of the Knakal Map Room. The map room is all about land sales and development properties in Manhattan. We're developing a map room for Northern Manhattan. There's going to be a broker. Justin Rice Moore is heading up our Northern Manhattan map room. Seth Samowitz, my COO, is going to head up our Queens map room. We're interviewing people today for a Brooklyn map room. They'll all be in the Manhattan office, but we'll focus on these different submarkets. We have a broker for us, Chima, that is focusing on the office to residential marketplace, which is a
Right.
very robust market, and a lot's going to happen there. And we're talking to a few people about being the multifamily broker. But again, we're going to be small. We're not implementing anything that
Sure.
is going to be boots on the ground covering every square inch of the city. That requires a big firm. And again, I don't have interest in doing that at the present time.
Absolutely. The are you going to ever take the map room? I mean, it's actually on the walls. If nobody's seen it, it's actually on the wall, on table. Are you ever going to digitize it?
Um, we're digitizing the information so that we can manipulate the information
Okay.
and apply AI algorithms to it. But I'm never going to digitize it because looking at that map on a computer screen really loses something relative to being in the map room and experiencing what that's like.
Yeah,
And just about everybody that comes in there says, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like this. This is the coolest thing." And I don't think the reaction would be quite the same if somebody was just looking on it on a computer screen.
I agree. I agree. It's got to be. I haven't been there to see it yet, but I will get there. I promise. Um, AI. I know you're a firm believer in AI. Are you guys implementing AI right now, or that's a work in progress?
No, we are
Process.
implementing it. Seth Samowitz, my COO, is an AI guy.
Oh, okay.
Uh, he's worked in driverless cars. He's started AI companies. Um, and so I'm a big believer that AI is going to change the way everything is done in our industry and many other industries. And so I think either get ahead of the curve or fall way behind. So I chose to get way ahead of the curve. And we're implementing AI in three ways. One, on the prospecting front, and there are many, many different ways to use AI for prospecting. Secondly, on the deal execution front, to make the funneling process
Yeah.
much more effective and efficient. And then in the data interpretation front, which I think AI can be extraordinarily powerful in, but is going to be very challenging for the real estate industry, mainly because the data sets that exist in the industry for the most part are not so great.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing the way that this is how quickly this is all getting implemented. I'm talking to several firms around the country, and everybody's working on it. Most of it, the bigger companies are for the back end, the office stuff. But some of them are doing like you are. Commercial Brokers International here in Los Angeles, we're focused on the front end as well, lead generation. And so I just think it's going to save a lot of time and energy. Do you think it's going to save a lot of staffing for you guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're using, not that this is AI, but we're using virtual assistants in some cases, and that has worked out really well for us. But I think it's such a time saver and makes everything so efficient and effective that it's a have to have thing today.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's just going to grow so much faster over the next couple of years. It's going to really change our industry, I think. So, uh, I've got one final question on brokerage, and then I want to move into what your thoughts are on becoming a commercial real estate agent right now. But Bob, can you tell me the top three characteristics of an agent you want when you're recruiting? What are you looking for in an agent that you're recruiting? What top three characteristics?
Right. Okay. Well, I've never been asked that question, but you would think I'd be asked that a lot, but I haven't been asked that before. But I will tell you, number one, we always looked for a competitive spirit.
Mhm.
Um, the real estate business is very, very competitive. It's also a business where you have to work with other people. So team sports was always a great place to find folks who had that competitive nature and could work with others well. But any competitive environment, whether it was and showing excellence in that competitive environment. So captain of the debating team or head of the school newspaper or something that exhibited some type of excellence within a competitive environment was something that we looked for. Number two, and probably the thing that we always told our HR folks is the person has to be likable. We had these different things that we looked for, where did you go to school? Where did you grow up? What type of person are you? What were your grades? What were your extracurricular activities, things like that. But even if somebody checked all the boxes, we always told our HR folks, look, if after you've met with these people, you don't feel like, hey, I'd have a really good time if I went out and grabbed lunch with this person or went out and grabbed a beer with this person, you can't offer them a job. Because in our industry, I think that likability is a very, very important characteristic. And the aptitude scale, one being someone who knows nothing, and 10 being the brightest, most intelligent real estate person there is. You can't get through life as a 3 or a 4. You have to be a solid 7 or 8. But if you're a 7 or an 8 and you have a great personality and you're very likable, you'll win business over that person who's a 10 unless they happen to have a great personality most of the time.
Yeah.
So we always, liked people who were personable, could speak well, outgoing, and I think that's probably another character. Outgoing folks who, had a lot of questions. Another thing in interviews we always did say, well, do you have any questions for us? And it was always remarkable how people would say, well, no, I think you answered everything. And like, to be an effective broker, you have to extract a lot of information from your potential client. And sometimes that's very, very challenging. Sometimes it's information they don't want to divulge. So you have to ask probing questions. You have to have an outgoing personality. You have to want to engage and talk to somebody. So we always liked people who asked a lot of questions. Generally, the more questions they had, the better salesperson they would be.
A good solid work ethic, right? You're going to need it in this industry.
Well, we always told people, Joe, you only have to work half a day to be successful in real estate. We didn't care what 12 hours of the day you worked, but
Right.
got to work 12 hours a day.
Yeah, I like that. I might steal that one. All right. Well, we've touched on brokerages. I want to touch a little bit on becoming a commercial real estate agent right now. Do you think it's a good time, Bob, to just drop everything I'm doing, go head on into becoming a commercial real estate agent right now?
Yeah, I think this is such a great business.
I agree.
It's never not a good time to become a broker.
Yeah.
If you're passionate about the area of brokerage you're getting into, get into it, learn your craft, read as much as you can. Hopefully your firm has a good training program. Try to become the best professional you possibly can. Get all your ammunition ready to go. The market always has been, is, and always will be cyclical. So good times are inevitable. They will come back, and put yourself in a position to take advantage of that.
Yep.
So, it may be a little slow now, but definitely going to pick up. It's definitely going to get better. And, you want to be around when those times are good.
I think so. I think it's a perfect time to get in, get educated. It's like you're saying, it's cyclical, and times are going to get better here, hopefully fairly soon. And you want to be able to ride that wave up. And so, what is going on? Let's talk a little bit about New York City. What's going on there? I know that you guys sales are down just a little bit. Let's talk about New York City. What do we got going on there in investment sales?
Well, the investment sales market in New York is it depends what property sector you're talking about. Um, we are in a market correction, no doubt about it. I've
Mhm.
been through four other major corrections. The S&L crisis in the early 90s, the recession in the early 2000s, the great financial crisis, 08, 09, and then what I like to refer to as the Great Slog, which was from October of 2015 through the beginning of 2021. And in each of those, every property type had values that were falling. They were just falling to different degrees. In this correction, which really started in the summer of 22, when the interest rate increases that started in March of 22 really started to impact real estate. Um, we've been seeing different product sectors moving in different directions. I'd say today in New York, the industrial market is strong, but that's such a small slice of the city market because of zoning that it doesn't really move the needle. The retail market is also very strong right now. Retail is strong because it started to get beat up 4 or 5 years before everything else did. And so the general perception is retail rents have stopped going down, leasing volume is picking up, and investor demand is back. The hotel market is also very strong in New York right now. We've had 30,000 hotel rooms taken out of the stock of 120,000 hotel rooms. So, think about it, 25% of the stock is no longer there because 14,000 rooms have been converted to student housing and other uses, and 16,000 rooms are occupied by migrants. So, and the city has really cut back quite a bit on allowing Airbnb to function here. So
Right.
ADRs are way up, occupancy is way up, and the hotel market is strong. Land is starting to turn the corner and is doing well. And so that is also relatively specific to product type for the land. And then you have the multifamily market and the B and C office market, which are having tough times. The multifamily market here was negatively impacted in June of 2019 when they made a huge change um, of changing the rent regulation laws even further against the interest of property owners. And actually, what they did is against the interest of tenants too, because the quality of the housing stock is deteriorating because there's a lack of investment by the private sector in the housing stock today. And then the refinancing risk that exists in multifamily is creating all sorts of problems for people.
Yeah.
B and C office sector is also, and I say B and C because Class A new construction is still doing relatively well, but B and C office is hurting. Close to 100 million feet empty. The city is trying to incentivize the conversion of B and C office to residential, and that's starting to kick in. But we have some zoning changes that the city's trying to implement. That's going to be helpful, but I think these B and C office buildings are going to fall into one of three buckets. Either they'll continue to be office because every tenant can't pay $250 a foot in the new Class A buildings. So there'll be a need for low and moderate priced office space. Secondly, there will be a number of these buildings that will be converted to residential. And then thirdly, values for some of these buildings have gotten so low that um, that even if you layer in demolition costs, these buildings are going to be demolished. So very, very interesting times ahead. We're going to see a lot of turnover, both discretionary and involuntary, but there's going to be a lot of change in the way the ownership field looks in New York City.
Be a little bit of money changing hands.
No doubt.
How many interest rate cuts this year? One, two? What do you think?
No idea. But look,
Yeah, me either.
I don't think they're going to be significant. I think maybe we're looking at 50 or 75 basis points. And that's not really going to help the folks who have a 3.5% mortgage that is maturing. And, today they're replacing it with a give or take 7.5% mortgage. So it's going to go
Right.
down to 675. That's still a tremendous increase in cost, and you're going to get anywhere from 25 to 35% less in proceeds.
Right.
So that's a real issue for people, and it's having a profound impact on the market.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's talk briefly about CRAI Summit coming up this September. Are you going to be there this year?
I will be there. I'm looking forward to it. I had a great time last year and looking forward to this year.
Yeah, I think it's a real opportunity for, if you're younger, or actually, if you're just in the industry and you want to learn how to do marketing, it's a great place to come and join us. It's going to be Atlanta this year. You're speaking this year?
I am.
Yeah. Okay. So you can come down and hear Bob speak, and we'll get another video out of him while he's there too. So,
There we go.
all right, Bob. Well, thank you very much for your time, Bob. I appreciate it.
You got it, Joe. Always great to be with you, my friend.
You bet. We're going to put a link to your new company down below, and we'll put a link to CRAI Summit as well. And thank you very much. Now, for those of you watching, thank you for tuning in today. If you could, please give us a like. Even if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe.